Welcome to a series called The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to see what it is we can expect to happen and what it is we should be doing in the end times as we prepare for the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ to reign as King on earth as it is in heaven. And where we are in this book is we just hit chapter 17, and chapter 17 gets very complicated. Because ultimately what we've seen is, up until this point, a lot, but the general idea is we've gone through 7 trumpets, and then there was at the 7th trumpet, that's Christ's return, but there was a pause in the story. And we were introduced to the dragon, the woman, the child, the beast of the air, the beast of the sea, all sorts of different things. And then there's these bowls of judgment, and there's 7 of them. And then at the 7th bowl, which is hitting about the same time as the 7th trumpet, time-wise, and after that 7th bowl, again, there's a pause in the story, and that's where we're at now. And we're introduced to a harlot. And we saw last week that this harlot, who sits on many waters, it's about sexual immorality. And we're just going to keep it there. We're going to kind of stick on these verses for a bit because there's a lot more to be grabbed from this. Because oftentimes what happens, people say there's a harlot on many waters, and they go on to the next thing. There is a lot going on here. And understanding this truly helps you understand, well, where is Babylon and who are these people? So we're just going to pick it up where we left off right there on Revelation 17, starting verse 1. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." Now, last episode we talked about that fornication, and really if you read this the way that the Greek words were meant to be, it kind of reads a lot like this verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth committed sexual immoralities with. And the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her sexual whoredom, is what those words mean. So it's about sex. This is all about sex. Very sexual, promiscuous place that we're talking about here. But let's kind of look at this many waters. There's a lot of speculation goes on what these many waters mean. So we're just going to see what the Bible has to say. So 17 verse 1, then one of those 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Now, oftentimes when people refer to many waters, because remember the beast came out of the sea, the great sea, and what we are going to see here essentially is the sea or the many waters can represent several different things. Well, we're going to jump ahead a little bit here because after we see this harlot and we kind of get a description of the beast that she's riding, which again we're going to get into great detail as we move forward, but this harlot who sits on many waters, to understand what these waters are about, we're going to jump ahead because an angel begins to explain to John what this is he's seeing. And if we look at Revelation 17, starting in verse 15, "And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." So this harlot, this harlot, we're going to find out, is Babylon. It's a nation of Babylon. And it's made up of many nations, tribes, peoples, multitudes, and tongues. And this is straight from the Word of God. And this is literally an angel telling John what this harlot is. So there's no confusing what this is. The harlot is a group of people who are made up of many nations, many peoples, many tribes, many tongues, just all sorts of people from around the world concentrated in one nation is what we're seeing. Now, I don't want to write off the waters as being water, because if you look at the word here, the waters, it's hydaton. It's literally water. So like when Jesus baptized with water, he baptized with hydaton. When the Ethiopian was saying, "Hey, look, there's water there," he said, "Hey, look, there's hydaton right there." So the word is aqua. It's water. It's hydaton. But clearly, it's also, well, it is. It's the multitudes, tongues, and nations. But this tribe of Babylon, before we get off this waters things, I just want to take a moment and even jump further ahead. After Babylon is destroyed, in Revelation 18:17, it says this of the merchants of the earth: "For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing, and every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, Sailors and as many as trade on the sea stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? So it literally is on many waters. Like, it's literally a water, it's a coast, it's definitely got some coastlines to it, this nation here. And as we'll find out, well, multiple coastlines as well. And a lot of times people will refer to Babylon as the city of Babylon. Let's just write that. That is nonsense. The city of Babylon in Iraq is an abandoned city that only a couple scientists will go and they'll try to unearth some different things. But that is not, the spiritual Babylon began from the very first civilization on the earth, and it's been an evil entity until the very end. So, and we'll get into that because we're going to get deep into Babylon over the next multiple episodes. We'll be here on Babylon. Covers chapter 17, 18, and part of 19, and we're just in the first two verses of 17. So we will hit the spiritual, but get the idea that it's some lost civilization in Iraq. It is not. It is the spirit of the Babylonian Empire, the evil spirit of Babel, that is now taking over in this nation that we're talking about. And this nation clearly influences the entire planet. All kings of the earth kind of lean on this nation for their riches, for their sexual immoralities, for their power, their military might, that kind of thing. So, now, being that this is a nation, and when Babylon gets destroyed, so does a third of the earth. So the big chunk of the earth is being influenced by this nation. And this nation of Babylon, this harlot, we know that it's very, very sexual immoral. As a matter of fact, the kings of the earth committed sexual immoralities with this nation, and the people of the nation, the people of the world, were made intoxicated by its sexual whoredom. So we know it's a very sexual, immoral nation. We know that the whole world feeds off of the blood of the sexual immorality of this particular nation that we're talking about as well. And we know that it is surrounded by water, at least on one side, and we'll get to that later, and then it's made up of many multitudes, many religions, many tribes, and many tongues. Now, I'm not going to say it out loud what nation we're talking about yet, but you know what nation we're talking about. There's only one nation in this world that fits this description, and as we continue to look at the description of Babylon, we're going to find every single piece of this puzzle just fits right into this nation. And again, we'll say it out loud. I'm not going to say it out loud quite yet, but you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what nation I'm talking about. It is not confusing where Babylon is, and when we look at the world and look at the biblical description of Babylon. But we'll keep going from there. So ultimately, just before we move forward, I just want to kind of recap. What we got going on here is we have a harlot, which is a nation of people, tribes, tongues, that is committing sexual immoralities with the world based on the blood of the saints, and God is going to judge it. And it happens to be on coastlines as well. So we're just going to pick it up right there. We'll move forward, pick it up in 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, we're going to pause there. So when John says he carried me away in the spirit, keep in mind, this is the same description that John used when he was carried away in the spirit to the throne room of God. So now he's being carried away again to see what's going on here. And what he sees is a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So ultimately what you have here is you have an angel coming up to John after he'd watched the final plagues, completing the wrath of God. And he said, come, let me show you the harlot that sits on many waters, the judgment of the harlot that sits on many waters, who has committed sexual immorality with the kings of the earth, and the people were made drunk on its sexual whoredom. And these people are made up of many tribes, nations, and tongues. So that's kind of where he laid the foundation for John. And that's why it's so important. Before we get carried away in the spirit, The angel kind of said, come, I'm going to show you these things. The judgment, the consequences, the justice that's going to be placed on this harlot, which is a nation surrounded by water, at least on one side. The merchants of the earth wail because they don't have anybody to sell their stuff to anymore. And this harlot has made the kings of the earth drunks on her sexual immorality. And the people of this nation are intoxicated by its sexual whoredom. And now that John knows this, now he said, okay, I'm going to show you this thing. He hadn't even seen the woman. He hadn't even seen the woman at this point. And that's what's so critical, is that he already knows these things, but he hadn't even laid eyes on her yet. And then the angel takes him in the spirit away into the wilderness of all places. So we're going to stop there. We're going to stop there because it's very important we know where John is. We're going to talk about this wilderness. We're going to talk about what it is he's staring at before it's described to him. That way we actually see what it is John is seeing with John's eyes, because he so far I hope you see John does a really good job recording what it is he's seeing in heaven. But he's taken away into the wilderness, and this is a very, very critical piece. So we're going to pause there, and we're going to pick it up there next time. But let's just read through these verses again, just for clarity, and then I'll kind of explain it as we go. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment and the justice, the consequences of the great harlot who sits on many waters, the great harlot who is made up of many tribes, nations, and tongues, with whom the kings of the earth committed sexual immorality, and the inhabitants of the earth were made intoxicated with the wine of her sexual whoredom. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast." This is fascinating stuff what John is seeing, and again, I without saying it out loud, I just I probably should just say it. I'm going to wait till the next couple episodes to say it out loud, but we all know what this nation is. It's not confusing who this is that we're talking about. So love to hear your thoughts on all that. If it is confusing, I apologize. We'll hit it next time. We will talk about this as we go through. There's just more we need to know before we start naming nations. But I think you're getting the idea, hopefully. Stick with us. We will name it in the next few episodes. Love to hear your thoughts on all this. Put it in the comments below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. Feel called to support this channel to Patreon. That link is also below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.